What's up, everyone? Welcome into the All 22 podcast, the official podcast of the All 22 fantasy football platform, the only fantasy football game with full 53-man rosters, including offensive linemen, where you get to choose personal packages and have access to PFF grading and advanced stats to make decisions each week. Ray, we are on the tier 2 section of this year's receiving group, which is extremely deep. That's why we're breaking it down into 3 episodes. We had 5 yesterday that we did. We have another 5 today, but there was some breaking news that we should probably talk about. So why don't we do that? So Mike Williams just agreed on a $15 million deal with the New York Jets to be their number 2 receiver. And I think it's a pretty fantastic deal for both sides, really, right? Mike Williams played with Justin Herbert, which is a great quarterback, but he goes to probably a much better quarterback in Aaron Rodgers just with experience. But, it's a great situation to go to being the number 2 to Garrett Wilson. That team is really starting to shape up. I love what they're doing there. And it's really not investing long-term assets, right? This is a 1-year deal. Tyron Smith was a 1-year deal. So again, it gives them great flexibility in the draft. Maybe it does mean Brock Bowers to the Jets. I don't know. I would still go tackle, but we'll see. And I like it for Aaron Rodgers as well, right? I think, with Garrett Wilson really being the only receiving option last year, even though he played like 4 snaps, it was definitely concerning. If you were a Packer fan, you knew that Alan Lazard isn't that guy, but Mike Williams maybe can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear what they're doing. Aaron Rodgers for 1 more year, maybe 2, and that's about it. So you bring in guys that are great right now, not necessarily great 3 years from now, like a Tyron Smith. The thing about Mike Williams, he's coming off of that ACL tear. I mean, it was early in the year, I think in week 3 where it took place. So it's not a late season tear that might really linger into the season, but we know that guys aren't necessarily always themselves the first year back from an ACL tear. Sometimes at all, which we might get into a little bit later with the other breaking news item of actually yesterday. But still, it's a big target who can go up and get the ball, who complements Garrett Wilson really well. I would just say, as someone following the Jets, I would still prefer attack. I don't say that as a Jets fan. I mean, if I were, because even if you draft, say, a tackle as opposed to just saying, oh, well, maybe I can get a guy who can help more year one, even if he's not necessarily the best prospect, is drafting a tackle is still a go for it now, a win now move, because like we discussed, Tyron Smith hasn't stayed healthy for a full season in ages. So just because the depth chart might have someone like Tyron Smith up top at the tackle position, you still need another, and that could be crucial in the event that injuries crop up again. But all in all, a good signing. He complements Wilson very well. Again, you got the quarterback now. They're putting the pieces around them to make a run while the defense is still one of the best in the league, if not the best. And while you have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
Yep. So great signing there by the Jets. And then Chase Young signed, like you said, yesterday to the Saints. And I wanted to rub it in your face a little bit just because when we had this conversation a while ago, I had said, probably the best thing for him is to take a 1-year deal, prove that he could stay healthy, bring up his stock before he signs that long-term deal. You're like, nah, this dude's going to get the bag. Well, he gets a 1-year
I didn't
deal.
say that. I said there are some off-field things that, teams are also considering when it came to Chase Young. Okay. He will never be my boy based on where he went to college ever. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, 2nd overall pick, and now he's basically Marcus Davenport. It's quite a fall, but like we talked about with knee injuries, right? He just hasn't been the same since that knee injury. He was a fantastic prospect coming into the league, was consistently getting pressure basically right away from day one in the NFL. But just because it's 2024 and modern medicine is fantastic doesn't mean that knee injuries can't still derail careers. They're not all the same. And for some, it hits worse than others. And Chase Young seems to be that type of injury. We're just never going to see that guy that we thought we were when he was coming into the NFL.
Right. But, I think it's a pretty good fit for the Saints. They had that need there. They're building that defensive line with their 1st-round pick last year. They have Carl Granderson. And then just like their front 7 in general, like with Pete Warner, DeMario Davis, William Gay, it's a pretty good group. And it's one of these weird, interesting situations where people keep saying, like, eventually the money has to catch up to them. And somehow they keep spending money. I don't know how they're doing it, but as a somebody that's a Saints fan should be excited that they got a premium player, skill wise at least for 1 year, and it doesn't really affect your future. So that's a good fit for the Saints. I think it's a better fit for the Saints than it is for Chase Young. He was, playing for the 49ers last year. They traded a decent amount to get him with the expectation probably that they would sign him to at least this 1 year deal. It is strange that he didn't get this offer from the 49ers. And if he did, he didn't take it, right? So something that tells me something as an evaluator in all 22 when I'm choosing my players might make me hit pause on drafting Chase Young.
Yeah, when you get him in the building and then a few months later, after having him in the building, you're like, yeah, we're good. Like I said, it tells you something. So just lends credence to the fact that there's always a bit more than just what you see on the field. But yeah, he is still a talented player. I think overall, like grading out wise at around 35th or so, give or take. So it's still starting caliber for the most part, but there's more to it than that. And then again, when you add in the injury history, it's a lot to consider. And so it does kind of all add up to a 1 year prove it deal, kind of a bit of a reset for him. And then you see how things shake out after 24. So not a bad move by the Saints, low risk, potentially high reward.
Yeah, I like it. So let's jump into these receivers, right? Because we got 5 of them. So let's get started. And we're going to start with Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman is this huge frame guy that basically is a bully on DBs. He has a big catch radius. He's a great red zone target, and he's extremely young. This is a 20-year-old receiver on draft day. He's 20 years old. Okay. So played at FSU, really good team. Jordan Travis there at quarterback. I joke with Ray because I like him. Ray hates him. But Keon Coleman is 6'4", 215 pounds. He played about 1,300 snaps with a 72.7 PFF receiving grade this past year, had 109 career receptions with 1,467 yards and 19 touchdowns. Before we really jump into the film, though, I just want to make a note that for the record, I thought Coleman should have been part of yesterday's episode. In my mind, he is that tier of receiver, not this tier of receiver. I think this group is a little bit better. He probably belonged there. And the reason I say that is because as much as I love his size, because of how young he is, I don't think there's a lot of nuance to his game. I don't think he's a route runner yet. He definitely is not a separator. And he relies a lot on just being, a bigger guy, right? And he played across from Johnny Wilson, so another bigger guy. And I think that's kind of what they did at Florida this year, at Florida State. So let's go ahead and play this clip here. So this is just a little quick comeback, but the reason I wanted to show it is because of, even though he is this bigger bodied receiver, I just don't see the polish, right? He's not able to separate on a simple curl route. He extends, he pushes off the DB. That might get called at the next level. And this much smaller DB actually makes a really nice play on the ball and is able to knock it out of Coleman's hands, right? Like if he is this big, strong receiver, he should come down with this pass. He doesn't, right? Like it's, to me, that there's so much that lacks with the polish of his game, and just him being this stronger, bigger receiver isn't enough, right? So that's just an example of that. Let's go to the next one. So here we go. He's lined up in the slot again, and another just push off, right? So he gets to the top of his route. Instead of sinking his hips, he just relies on his strength to basically just shove the DB off of him right here. And that's his leverage, right? And he makes a nice catch. He gets out of bounds. But to me, again, that's probably getting called at the next level. He doesn't sink his hips. He doesn't break down. He just relies on his bigger frame. But he makes a nice catch. He gets out of bounds. First down. Great. Next play here shows just a little bit more nuance that I did like to see. This is him. It was a kind of a fake screen play where he is in the end zone. Gets in the end zone, right? So fake screen, DB falls for it. He's wide open in the end zone. It's a good play, right? It's just a good call. They use him for things like this. This is the type of receiver they used him as. And it's probably what he's going to need to be doing at the next level because of the lack of nuance to his game. All right. I think
I just figured something out too. This is great. I just made my life a whole lot easier. Let's go. Next play.
Good. All right. Next play here. This is him. This is my favorite play of his. Okay. So He is the receiver at the bottom of your screen. He is doing about a 10-yard in route, and he just decides that he's going to keep going. He sees his quarterback's in trouble, and he doesn't give up on the play. Some of the other guys did. He keeps going. He finds the sideline, and he actually gets some yak. I was a little under impressed with his yak ability. I thought he had more to offer, and it just wasn't outstanding on film. But the reason I still have hope for a guy like Coleman is because of plays like this, right? Where he just doesn't give up. He's 20 years old. He still works hard. He puts in the time. He puts in the effort. I could tell his quarterback likes him. That effort shows me that there's still promise to his game. So something I like to see. Was that it for Coleman, or is there more here?
Oh, there's more. I think you got maybe two more.
Oh, geez. All right, let's
just
go.
hogging up the film here.
Yep. This is a deep route, right? Yeah, I wanted to show just the lack of speed, right? It's another concern. It showed up at the combine where he ran like a 4.6 something. He is without nuance. You want to see him at least be able to run a 9 and get open with his speed. And the DB basically matches him perfectly because he's just not outrunning people, right? That's just not the kind of guy. He doesn't have that speed yet. Maybe he will because he's 20 years old, but it's hard to teach speed. It's hard to learn speed. So that play was a little bit of a concern. I hope this is the last one. Go ahead and hit play.
Top of the screen.
Top of the screen. It's a little glitchy. This is the type of athlete he is. Even though there's not the separation, he's able to make big contested catches in the end zone. This was like a game winner, actually. So great play by him. But just, again, like the quarterback trusts him, gives him the opportunity. He doesn't separate, but because of his big body, he's able to make a nice play, use his strength, and come down with the football to help them. I'm pretty sure they won this game. So that's what I'm going to leave it at, right? It's a raw prospect that lacks nuance, but definitely has these attributes to some of the better receivers in the league. But it's going to take a few years, in my opinion. I don't think this is a guy that you're going to be able to start day one, and he's going to just prove himself and be this day one contributor. I see him more as like a Treylon Burks. That's kind of my comp for him right now, which is unfortunate because Treylon Burks hasn't done it yet, but it doesn't mean he won't, right? I still have faith in these guys that they could learn and become better. And to me, Treylon Burks was a first-round pick, but I see teams learning from that, and maybe Keon Coleman is a mid-second round pick. I don't see him as that high level. Again, I see him, later than some of the guys we talked about yesterday. That's where I kind of have him. My comp is Treylon Burks, mid-second round pick. He's not in my all-22 era because he's just, in my mind, not that type of prospect. You had asked me to review Keon Coleman because you wanted my take on it. I'm curious if yours is much different.
I don't know if it is or not. He was hobbled a lot this year. I think after like week 2, wasn't quite the same, kind of playing through some nagging injuries, was very productive against LSU week 1. Kind of saw some flashes there. He is a super young prospect. I think he's not a fast prospect, but I think he's, aside from, yes, obviously the acrobatic one-handed catch that you see on film and such, I feel like he's a natural athlete just without the speed. And so I think there's a smoothness to his game that you don't normally see with such tall and big wide receivers. And he is so young. The long speed, the deep speed, no, he's not that type of player. But I do wonder if everything else is there in his game, how good he could be. I probably wouldn't draft him among the first 5, 6, 7 receivers in the class, but I wouldn't be shocked if his career is among the top 5 best of the class at wide receiver, because I think maybe we might be singing a bit of a different tune if he was healthy for the majority of this past season. And again, he is just so young that there's probably some untapped potential there. There definitely is some untapped potential. That's just what exactly is that ceiling? Because I think he has some traits that aren't necessarily seen in the majority of prospects that are his size. So I don't know exactly where to slot him, but I'm very intrigued by what he can become. So I'm always interested to hear what other people think, because I think he's a pretty polarizing player. No one's talking about him because there's polarizing players at more polarizing positions, and because receiver is so deep that this one kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I think there's a lot of upside with Keon Coleman, or there can be. It's just you're not necessarily going to find it for the most part on what you're studying for this class, because he was kind of hurt. And before that, even before he transferred in from Michigan State, I mean, Michigan State was a mess before he transferred over to FSU. So I'm not sure we've seen it all come together yet for Keon Coleman.
I agree with your take, but I think my comp with him being Treylon Burks, like, what's the story been on Burks, right? Is like, you're talking about, we didn't see him healthy. It's like, okay, well, is that going to continue at the next level, right? Is that something that's going to be recurring because he is a big guy, right? That sometimes that's what happens when you're a big, strong receiver. But the two biggest concerns I really had with him when watching this is when you watch receiver tape, a lot of times there's 5 or 6 plays where you're like, man, the quarterback should have found him, right? He was open. Quarterback should have got him the football, given him the opportunity. I didn't feel that way. Like, again, I'm kind of like the Jordan Travis guy. I like him. Like, I thought he made a lot of the right decisions, and a lot of those decisions were not to throw to Coleman. I think the second issue that I have is it's obvious that Travis likes Johnny Wilson better than Coleman, right? Like, he targets Johnny Wilson when he's under duress. He always tries to get him the football. He doesn't rely on Coleman. Sometimes that's because they have different skill sets. Guys have different skill sets, and maybe there's a better route runner that's always just your get open option guy. That's not really the case when you're talking about Johnny Wilson, who's also this massive human being, right? So just kind of made me pump the brakes. Maybe it's the injury stuff. Maybe he was just hurt, and maybe he'll get healthy and it'll all work out. I don't think I'm the guy that's taking that risk.
Yeah, it's a risky proposition. That's why I don't know where to slot him, but I don't think he's going to be among the first half dozen or so picked in this draft. So he kind of goes back into that soup of mid, late, second, early, third round. I don't think he gets to the mid third. I think he's going to get snatched up before then, but kind of falls into that bucket, 50-ish, 60-ish. Overall on a big board, so to speak, and you just kind of, see where the chips fall from there. So, but he can outperform that. So it's one of those deals where not a shot in the dark. There's an upside play there more so than what you see today.
I definitely agree with that. Okay, so you're going to go next. You have both the Texas receivers. Which one are you going with first? And I'll run out their numbers.
We're gonna let's stay with the bigger receivers here, and I'll go with Adonai Mitchell first. Let me take some time to pull him up, and we can get started.
While you're pulling up Adonai Mitchell, I'll talk about him. So Texas receiver, 21 years old, 6'4", 196 pounds. He played 1,180 snaps with a 74.7 PFF grade from this past season. He has 64 receptions. Is that right? Yeah, 64 total receptions for 1,109 yards and 12 touchdowns. Okay, back to you.
Yeah,
if you're ready for it.
I'm always ready. So, yeah, Adonai Mitchell, big receiver. I think he actually weighed in at was it 205 at the combine or something like that? He weighed in a bit heavier than expected at the combine and ran a fast time, which got him on a lot of people's radars. Obviously, the other Texas receiver, Xavier Worthy, stole the show as it relates to speed there. A common theme that we're going to talk about, and we actually started talking about in the previous episode about wide receivers, is strong hands and wanting to see strong hands. And some players who just don't have it, or at least don't have it consistently. And I don't know, Chris, the more I watch some of these receivers, I don't know if you feel the same way, the more I like Ricky Pearsall. So I'm just going to throw that out there before we get in. But anyway, Adonai Mitchell, let's just get started here. So again, Bama tape. So you got top of the line. You got Arnold and McKinstry at corners and such, Caleb Downs at safety. I mean, you got a star-studded secondary. You expect no less. So one thing right off the bat, you mentioned his numbers, and he has a great 40 time. So you're just going to see straight go route. Not a ton of nuance there, just going up, getting the pass, just being an athlete, right? And that's what you on field play.
Was that Kool-Aid, or was that
I don't know. I gotta go back, look at the numbers here.
Yeah, come on.
You look at the numbers. I'm looking at the receiver.
Right,
you look at the
thing.
TV.
You do your thing. So, you do your thing.
And what does it matter? They're both collecting a paycheck in a couple months from the NFL. But in any event, so that's sort of the on the hoof, what you see just straight off the bus with Mitchell. Big, fast, and can track the ball well, which is very important, especially if you're going to have that size. Sometimes when you see someone who's big and can move and doesn't have that size, or doesn't have that ability to track the ball, it's just one of those frustrating things because that really leads to a wasted talent. So you hate to see that. He seems to be able to track the ball pretty well downfield, which is great to see. So another thing I do like about him is I'm not sure I'd call him nuanced, but he's not necessarily stiff in how he runs routes. He does switch things up, kind of switches up his strides a little bit. So here he gets picked up from the inside, a defender here off the stack, and kind of just goes ahead and just kind of jukes out the safety's leverage here to get upfield. Now ball's out of his hands already. They're going to the deep sideline, and safety kind of already heated that way. So he might have ended up, in the safety's zone anyway downfield. But again, he's a bit not nuanced again, but kind of can make things happen on the fly with his routes, which sometimes is not always a great thing with receivers, but you like to see the ability to just kind of switch things up mid-play. You have a plan. If it doesn't work, what's your counter? Even if it's not necessarily always by the book, I kind of like that about Mitchell is he does that a lot. He kind of has this on the fly kind of ad lib to his routes. He's not the most technically sound, so at least he kind of has that propensity to, again, just kind of shake things up, make things happen a bit, and then the refinement can come later on in his career. So that's all I wanted to show there. Nothing crazy to break down. But then here, what I like about him too is for a big guy, he kind of breaks down quickly and gets out of his cut. You see here, kind of heading inside, has some separation from the defender here. But again, strong hands, doesn't come up with the catch. So he does everything right. He breaks down quickly for a tall receiver, gives his quarterback a very friendly target right here. This is a great window to throw into, but then just can't complete the catch. I mean, defender does a great job finishing over his outside shoulder, but you got to catch that pass. You are between the ball and the defender, and it hits you in the hands, and you're stationary for the most part. You're coming back to the ball. You got to make that catch. You got to be as tough as you are big in those situations. And again, kind of, we've mentioned this at the start for some other positions, but what we kind of show here, at least how I do this, right, is we show a handful of plays here, but what we show is kind of what we see as a pattern on film, and we don't show every play of what we see necessarily on tape. But if we notice a pattern, we're going to show a play that highlights that pattern, right? So again, here as another, he's just going to run a crosser over the middle and just kind of kind of loaf it out. I don't know if he expected to get hit by the backer or just didn't expect him to be there, but you gotta put forth a better effort than that. That's just not good enough. And that's going to draw the ire of a coach in the NFL. So and I think that's the one element to Mitchell's game that's missing. And we just watched Ricky Pearsall spot to his game that's missing, aside from the typical technical refinement that you might see from a young receiver entering the league. I want to see more in traffic at that size.
He's athletic. He was an athletic freak, but I think he earns himself a lot of money just because he really does have boss wide receiver one vibes to him, right? Like you're talking about the way he has a little bit of this like twitch to him at the top of routes where he's able to break down DBs and do a little ab lib work. And like, those are things that you want a number one receiver to be able to do. Like not everybody can do that, right? We just watched Keon Coleman, massive lack of production for Adonai Mitchell. That's concerning to me, right? And like, why wasn't he why didn't he have 1,400 yards if he is this number one receiver? And it's partially because this offense was awesome, right? Like they had a lot of weapons. They were this great offense, and there's mouths to feed. So it could be that. But the thing that brings me back to liking him and thinking that there is a chance for him to be a major success, he did produce against the top teams. And you're showing us Alabama. Like whenever I looked at his kind of like game logs of his PFF grading against top teams, it was always really good. So he's a guy that rises to the occasion. What you talked about here, where he's kind of a little lazy on this route, doesn't really put in the effort. This is a huge concern for me on multiple of the top receivers of this draft. There are guys like Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Jermaine Burton, who on every play are putting in max effort. And then we get to a guy that we're like, this should be a wide receiver one. And it's like, they're not, right? And it's a little concerning. I think because of the upside to Adonai Mitchell's game, where you look at him and what do you see? You see CD Lamb, right? Like just from a body perspective, the way he moves is CD Lamb. He doesn't know how to run routes yet, right? It's it's promising, right? It's definitely promising. I have him as my number 6 receiver in this draft because of that, because I'm banking on that upside. But I could very well see him having, like you talked about, Keon Coleman could end up with his career being the 5th best receiver in this draft. There's a chance that Adonai Mitchell ends up being like the 15th best receiver in this draft, or it could end up he's the third, right? There's a huge range of outcomes for him, but he is a guy that I'd rather take that gamble on.
Yeah, so there's an element of being a natural to the game when it comes to receivers who can ad lib at the top of their routes and kind of have that counter move mid play when their first plan doesn't work out, right? That is a trait of a lot of the top receivers, like you mentioned. That's something that's probably not talked about enough, is just that natural feel for things. And he's got it. But like you said, the other things have to come together because, again, not having strong hands in traffic, not being willing to go into traffic to make tough plays is going to reduce your target share in the league and the amount of runway you get to develop in the league. So those things have to come together. Young player, it's all there, but you need to take that next step.
All right, let's go to Troy Franklin. Can you make that happen?
I can absolutely make it happen in
Cool.
30 seconds or so.
So Troy Franklin is the number 1 receiver at Oregon for Bo Nix, 21 years old, 6'3", 187 pounds. Could have weighed in heavier at the combine. I don't have that in front of me. Played 1,550 snaps, 88.5 receiving grade this past year, so a very high receiver grade, which is good. 146 reception and 2,344 career yards with 23 touchdowns. So this is a very, very productive receiver. Just high level, kind of from my perspective, he's a great stride runner. He can burn anyone on any play. He runs really well in a straight line, but he does lack some lateral speed and movement skills that I think he might be getting credit for. You know, people are seeing that speed and thinking it'll translate that way, but I didn't really see it all that much. If he gets to space, he will not be caught. That's another thing about his game, right? If he catches a ball with one guy to beat, there's a really good chance he's going to make that guy miss. And I do think that there is more to his game than being a deep threat. He showed mostly his ability to be a deep threat. That's what you see most on film. But there are things that he can do that tells me that there's more to unlock in his game than just that. I also love that he has production numbers, right? Guys that are deep threats usually have, you know, just the long throws to their game, and that's it. So their numbers are a little bit lower. That's not the case for Franklin. They did use him a lot, so that's promising. There isn't a lot of nuanced route running to his game in college, and I think that's a little bit like part of this Oregon offense we talked about with Bo Nix. Like sometimes just because you don't see something doesn't mean he can't do it. Bo Nix was asked to do a lot of things like quick screens and RPO. With that, it's all right, Troy Franklin, go run a lot of deep routes, right? So just because he didn't run a lot of routes doesn't mean he can't. Okay, let's jump into the film and we'll talk about it some more. Okay, the arrow is him at the bottom of the screen. This is a great route from my perspective where he does a great job getting inside leverage and making the cornerback just basically whiff on. It looks like he's in press. He gets that inside leverage, breaks in, and Bo Nix throws a great pass, and Troy Franklin makes a good contested catch, a strong catch, which I like to see, right? This is a smaller receiver in terms of weight, and sometimes getting contact at the catch point can make you drop these kind of passes. He does a great job on this play, although I would have liked to see him get better separation. I think he does slow down, so he sits in that linebacker zone, so the linebacker cannot make a play on this ball. Great play by Franklin in my mind. And it's not a deep route. Okay, so here's him lined up in the slot, running down the field, and he breaks to the post, and he is wide open, right? When I talked about before, I said, when this guy gets to open field, he will not be caught. The cornerback on this play essentially lost leverage. Franklin does a great job getting that inside space. Safety is nowhere to be seen. Catches the ball, finds the end zone. There's no shot he's being caught when he has this much space. It's impossible. So again, I'm just showing some of the things that make Franklin, in my mind, a special player. Okay, last play here. This is kind of the knock, right? I say he can't be caught if he's one-on-one. But what about if you're trying to run a screenplay and there's some guys that you need to make miss? I think here he should have went outside and he would have had maybe a chance at the sideline. Instead, he goes inside and there's somebody there. He doesn't make anybody miss, right? And I think that's part of the lateral movement that I think he lacks. I think he's great in that straight line when he has open field. But in terms of, okay, just this using him as a screen guy, I don't really think that that's his game. And I don't think there's going to be this easy yak ability on short yardage plays like that. Maybe if there's an in route where he catches short and all he has to do is beat a safety, it's different. But if it's you're giving him a screen and he's got to make a couple people miss, to me, that's just not this guy's game. Is there more or is that it?
Oh, there's more.
Okay, let's keep going.
There's always more.
This is him on a deep route. I wanted to show this one because it shows how teams respect his speed, right? The safety is going to, if he sees him run deep, the safety knows I got to get there, right? This guy's going to score. He's going to beat the guy he's running against if I don't get over the top. So they basically double team him on this play, right? And make a good play at the catch point, and Franklin isn't able to come up with the ball. That's going to happen a lot in the NFL. You do need to respect this guy's speed. So just wanted to show that. I think maybe there's one more. And here he's lined up in the slot. And this is a nice out route. So again, there's not nuance to this, right? It's not, he doesn't break down. He doesn't sink his hips. He doesn't beat the guy with shiftiness. He just finds space and gets a first down because he's fast, right? He's going to get to his spot before the defender does. That's something that translates to me, right? Like that, you can do that all day at the next level if you're fast enough to do it. DB has to be respectful of that inside leverage because already twice this game, you've seen him just absolutely destroy the guy on the inside. So let's beat him outside. And that's what Franklin does here.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so much more commonplace in today's NFL than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. The ability to just run into space with your routes, whether it's not just after the catch, but even just before the catch. It's something that's more used, more accepted in today's game and in today's passing game. That just wasn't the case 10 years ago, even, where there was more rigidness in the route tree and what offenses expected timing wise. So that does play into someone like Franklin's game, in 2024 at the next level. But the more I watch these receivers, the more I like Ricky Pearsall, man. I'm just saying there's some stuff there to Franklin's game that, again, you mentioned it, the Oregon offense makes things so easy for these guys that it's tough to find many plays where you go, this is going to translate outside of here's just the speed and running and running under the ball or whatever the case may be. There's not much there that translates right away. Even like I just mentioned with the more sort of openness in today's game and the more sort of freelance ability that a lot of players have, there's not much that translates there right away. And so you want to see a bit more, more refinement, at least with what he does do whether it's in traffic or just beating people off the line with some savvy. Like we kind of mentioned, Mitchell has that savvy, even if it's not necessarily refined by any means. I'm not sure I see that quite with Franklin. So hot take. I don't know. I don't think I would touch him in the first 60 picks.
Wow.
I get that he translates better to today's game and he's got some speed, but this receiver class is deep. And especially if I'm someone who's a bit more risk averse and I want a bit more of a sure thing, there's a lot of guys in this class that I can sleep better at night in my offense than Troy Franklin.
Wow. That is a really hot take. And I think the reason being is because a lot of teams are like you, where they are kind of ageless, right? He's 21 and Ricky Pearsall's 23, and that makes a difference on draft day. I think Franklin does have more to offer than what his tape showed because of where he played. I think that teams will covet that deep speed that he offers. We see that happen on draft day often, right? There's a reason why Henry Ruggs went first in a draft with Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb and receivers like that, and Justin Jefferson, right? It's because teams just cut, especially the Raiders at the time were run by an awful, group of GMs.
It's better now. I didn't know it was better.
No, it's not
Okay.
much, but it was bad before. But it happened more than that, right? Marquise Brown went first in his draft too, right? Like there's teams that covet those type of receivers, and AJ Brown and DK Metcalf were in that draft, right? Like teams like speed. They like speed, and I think teams will like that with Franklin. I do have concerns that he'll end up being like an MVS kind of player or like a Jalen Hyatt, and you don't take that in the first round, right? You take that in, like you're saying, maybe the third round. I think Franklin's better than those guys. He's a better version of those guys. So I have him higher than that. I probably have him as my receiver 7 in this class, above the guys that we looked at yesterday. But I think you might have convinced me that I'm way too down on Ladd McConkey. I know I'm
watching those two back to back.
Yeah.
It's jarring.
Yeah. And I'm super high on Pearsall. So it's just, am I willing to invest in a 23-year-old receiver with a top pick? That's really hard for me, but I think there's definitely conversation to be had. But let's move on to Xavier Worthy from Texas. Xavier Worthy is, let me get his information up. Apologies. I was looking at Xavier Legette. Xavier
He's
Worthy.
Fast, I'll tell you that much. Yeah.
Yeah. 21 years old. He's 6'1", 172 pounds. He's played 2,000 snaps with a 73.4 PFF grade this past season, 181 receptions for 2,537 yards this past year. For perspective, the guys that we've been talking about, that is easily top 2-3 receivers in terms of production numbers. It's truly special, and he has 25 touchdowns. So again, an extremely productive receiver. Let's see what you have to say about him.
Yeah, so we talk about speed, right? We just talked about Troy Franklin. I think it's natural to jump right into Xavier Worthy. We know this, Chris, right? There are 2 ways to deal with super fast guy at wide receiver, right? You can either go up, press him, and try to muck up his timing and all that other stuff and get physical, or you can back off and show respect that way, not let him beat you deep, have some safety help, yada, yada, right? The former, you definitely have to know what you're doing, but those are the ways that people deal with fast receivers. With Worthy, he's very good against one and needs a lot of work in the other. So we're going to start here with this first rep against Bama. Again, we're just going to go back to the Bama tape because it's the perfect barometer. So at the top of your screen here, the release isn't great, doesn't threaten the DB at all, ends up just sort of being a quarterback scramble after the fact. But even with this first step here, you've got the speed, and that first little stutter, you didn't go vertical at all. You stood in place, right? Didn't threaten him vertically at all, and then committed to the inside. So he was able to just kind of ride you to the inside. You never beat his leverage. Quarterback rolls out, scrambles for 10-ish yards or so anyway. So it's just, you didn't see, right off the jump, you didn't see him threaten or make an opposing defender respect his speed and back off. Sometimes you want a speed receiver to make the DB back off, because when you're quick and fast, it is a deadly proposition in press coverage at times, because if you miss, it's a big play. He didn't threaten the DB there. He didn't make them back off. I want to see that from someone who is, 170 something pounds, who runs a 4.2. You need that element of your game, or else they are going to muscle you at the line. So just one example there. And then here, again, we talk about play strength. We talk about the worst block we've ever seen from Jatavian Sanders there. But you know what? I also kind of want you to run through this. I want you to run through the arms a little bit here, right? Pick up those feet and run through that. You could have had a touchdown, especially when you see it from the other angle. That contact balance when hit low is not necessarily there, right? But then again, upper body wise, he kind of brings it a little bit. This is not the only instance in this game where he breaks a tackle when kind of hit up high. So despite kind of being a lighter prospect, he's got a bit of wiry strength to him. So while he won't necessarily run through anybody, he'll bounce off you if you're not necessarily sound in how you attack him when the ball is in his hands. So Again, just some things to work on with the nuance and strength to his game. But then here, when you do respect the speed and back off, this is what makes him so deadly and what has, offensive coordinators salivating to get a guy like that in their system, because you have to back off, you have to respect the speed. And then before you know it, he's 12 yards down the field, picks up about 20 there, easy first down. And so it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's why they love the speed and it's so tantalizing. And then here again, when you back off, that speed still catches up to you and he'll beat you anyway. He will still run by your coverage regardless and track the ball phenomenally, basically, right? So again, deep safety tries to pick him up, plenty of cushion still, and he just runs right by it, tracks the ball over the shoulder, touchdown. It's textbook. It's beautiful, just running by the coverage. But then here, I'm sorry, you got to catch this pass. When he has to reach away from his frame, it's a bit hit and miss. I don't know what the hand size is. I don't know if you had that from the combine or not either, but he can make some tough catches, but the hands are inconsistent at times when he has to go away from his frame, and he doesn't have a big catch radius. So that's something that's going to have to be worked on in the league as well, because you don't want to let go of these easy ones because you can separate for yourself because of the respect they have for your speed and quickness, but you got to finish here. And again, this is something that kind of appears now and again on film when you watch, and he gets away from his frame. It can be a hit or miss proposition there when it just comes to catching the football. So things that have to be cleaned up, especially at the line of scrimmage for someone like him. But the speed is tantalizing. You could do so much with him as a coordinator. He's a game breaker, even if he's not polished. So I'm a big fan of Xavier Worthy.
I love Xavier Worthy, so I'm happy to hear that you like him too. So this is my wide receiver 4 in this draft, and I know there's a lot of debate by people saying, that basically all the guys we talked about today are in debate for that spot, and even some of the guys yesterday. But to me, it's clearly Worthy, and it's not just the speed, because some of the things you showed me today are plays that are a little bit advanced, like that play right there where he runs through the chest. And again, this is a guy that's not 180 pounds. To me, that's special, right? And it shows effort. It shows that he's a hard worker. He's willing to put in the effort. He's willing to lower his shoulder and rough it up if he needs to. I love that, right? But I think this play especially, right? He just burned a deep safety. Like, he burns a deep safety. How do you do that, right? Like, that's insane to burn a deep safety that way. And he does it, and he makes a terrific catch there. But the biggest reason to me is this is a player that had elite production at college with another first-round receiver on his offense and a tight end that's going to end up going in the first 3 rounds, right? This is, to me, reminiscent of the Jerry Jeudy versus Devonta Smith debate from a few years ago. I don't know if you remember, but Devonta Smith was the team's leading, target share, yards, touchdowns. But everyone was saying that Jerry Jeudy was the better receiver. And you look back at that and you say to yourself, there's something to the quarterback choosing the other guy. If the quarterback is choosing somebody to throw to over the guy you think is better, maybe there's something to that. Maybe that guy isn't better, right? And to me, that's back then you can look back and say, I thought Jeudy was better. I didn't, but you did. But people would look back and say, I think Judy's better. And I look back and I said, no, like Devonta Smith had production. He did a lot of the same things as Jeudy. He was a great route runner. And we look, fast forward now, and Devonta Smith is clearly the better player, right? Clearly. We're going to see Jerry Jeudy in a new system. Maybe it looks different.
Jerry Jeudy might finally have a quarterback. Who knows? I don't know.
On what team?
I'm just saying, it's been bad. Okay, fine. It's been bad in the NFL. I was going to do the whole bit where ever since high school, is it? No, that's just Allen Robinson. So sorry.
No. But Xavier Worthy to me is that guy, right? 2,500 receiving yards with Adonai Mitchell and Sanders at tight end. Like, there's a lot of talent, and he's the guy getting the ball. He's more than just a deep threat. He's a route runner. He's a hard worker. He does all of those little things well. I think being a little heavy on deep usage, that's a little concerning. He's obviously extremely small. That's always going to be concerning with injury risk. To me, my comp is Devonta Smith Marquise Brown hybrid. I think he's a little bit different than Devonta Smith because Devonta Smith was probably the best route runner I saw in college. I don't think Xavier Worthy is there. More Marquise Brown in that respect, right? But he's also not Marquise Brown in terms of, I think Marquise Brown, there are things to Marquise Brown's game that obviously haven't worked out in the NFL, and I don't think he has those things. I'm not going to go into detail into that.
Yeah,
but
you could do. Yeah, I know that there are things you like about Marquise Brown's game that have not translated. So yeah, that's Xavier Worthy. I think he has a little bit of polish to his game compared to some of the other just fast guys. Like a lot of people talk about, you hear after, he broke the 40-yard dash of someone like John Ross. So like, yes, this is not the same player as John Ross. And you get the contrarian take about, oh, well, plenty of guys run fast. Look at the guy whose record he just broke, and he was a total bust. So don't get caught up in the hype. No, there's much more to it than just the speed. The tracking of the ball that you just saw there is fantastic. The bouncing off of defenders when the ball is in his hands and he's not clipped low is there, right? So he is a player. The production is there. The profile is good when you put in the production and the speed and the ability to track the ball downfield. That's all a good offensive coordinator needs to allow this guy to be a game breaker in the NFL and use him properly. So upside is sky high with Xavier Worthy, despite the clear limitations that he might have size-wise. Of course, you have to go into a good situation and help permitting and all that, but I don't know. I think he's a top 40 player for me. I think he's that good. I don't know if he's receiver 4 for me. You're going to talk about the next guy here who a lot of people also have as receiver 4, and they're two totally different flavors of ice cream. So sorting that out, I still got to do. I'm impartial to guys like Worthy, even going all the way back to, for young kids out there might not know, Dexter McCluster. I was all about Dexter McCluster back in the day. And I think he just came into the NFL too early, quite frankly. But guys like that and guys like Worthy, I usually am sympathetic to. So we'll see where it comes out in the final big board. But yeah, big fan of Worthy. Don't need to go on wax poetic about it.
Well, yeah, I do. I want to express this, that I do have concerns with when a guy's so fast that's like too much of his game. And that's what John Ross was, right? It's like, that's all he was. I don't think that's Xavier Worthy. So I understand that concern, but I don't think you need to have the same concern as you would have with Ross. Another thing I'll say, how many of these guys that run that fast pull up at the end of their 40 with a hammy injury, right? Like, because like, and that wasn't Worthy either, right? Like, this is a guy that, went through all of the drills, looked great, was smiling, was posing for pictures at the end. Like, there's something to that too. Like John Ross pulling up with a hammy when he broke the record, that concerned me right away.
Did he do that? I don't remember that. If he did.
Yes, he did. And I think somebody did it this year that ran really fast. I'm trying to remember who.
Oh, Olu Fashanu. Yeah. Olu pulled up with a hammy after his. It was actually a thigh, but yeah, Olu.
Like, that's concerning to me. But anyway, ding, ding, ding. We have our first guy that made my all 22 era list. It's Xavier Worthy. He is 15. So he's the very end for me. He's replacing Chris Olave, Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnson. He's pushing those guys off the list. So Xavier Worthy is right behind number 14, Garrett Wilson, for me on my all 22 list.
That's very high. Oh, that's wow. And so every prospect that we're going to talk about later on outside of this episode, you're saying you have higher in that all 22 list?
I do.
Wow. Okay. That part isn't surprising to me. It's you really like Worthy. So
I do. I really like Worthy.
We'll talk about that. That's the next episode. It's a future episode.
Yeah. But like Zay Flowers, right? He's beating a guy like that. Like, I like Zay Flowers, but I thought Zay Flowers was very limited to what he can do. And I didn't think he was a route runner at all. Right. I think he had a great year this year. But it was because he went to kind of the perfect system for what he was. Chris Olave, I think, is an amazing route runner, but I think he's kind of just a route runner. I thought he was just a route runner. He's not a game-breaking player. I think Garrett Wilson is where you start to get into that, where this is a game-breaking kind of player that can go onto your team and be an absolute superstar. Worthy is right on that border for me, where I think that he could be that, but I could also see him being just under that level of player. But also just remember, we've had fantastic receiver classes lately. They've been really good. So you look at like the rest of the guys on the list and like basically all of them are hits besides two. So, like it's saying a lot for Xavier Worthy that he made the list, but it's also like, there's plenty of guys on it above him still. So go ahead.
Yeah. And one last thing. We talked a lot about Xavier Worthy. He is not Tyreek Hill. Let's just say that he's not Tyreek Hill. So just putting that out there too. Tyreek Hill's a different beast between the build and just everything else he brings to the table. Don't expect that or use that as your baseline, because you're always going to be disappointed. So just for that fringe out there.
No, absolutely. He's not that player. Tyreek Hill is like 30 pounds on this kid, right? And he does has a lot of the same strengths, but he's 30 pounds heavier. That's a difference maker. But okay, let's move on. I think we're going to Brian Thomas Jr. And this is for me. LSU receiver, 21 years old. He's 6'4", 205 pounds, 1,400 snaps, 74.5 PFF receiving grade this past year, 111 receptions for 1,729 yards, 21 total touchdowns. Obviously played with great players like Malik Neighbors, who we'll talk about later this week, and then quarterback Jaden Daniels. So a very special offense. Let me just get my notes ready. So Brian Thomas, just really quickly, he's a very smooth athlete for his size. We talked about Adonai Mitchell having a lot of swag to the way that he ran his routes and did things. Thomas has a lot of that too, where he's definitely too smooth for his height, right? Keon Coleman has the height, but doesn't have that smoothness. Brian Thomas, Adonai Mitchell bring that to their game as, potential X kind of players. He has extremely long arms with this massive catch radius. And he's, if not the best deep threat in this class, obviously Xavier Worthy is probably the best deep threat in this class, but he's one of them, right? We talked about just a few minutes ago, Troy Franklin being that deep threat. I think that Brian Thomas offers very similar strength there, but at a better size, a better build, better athleticism, better movement skills. So I really like that aspect of Brian Thomas's game. Things to note, though, on the negative side, this is a guy that probably lacks things in his release package, where I really saw him being kind of just a one-trick pony with the way that he gets off the line. I also think that he has a very limited route tree and showcased kind of limited weapons to what he can do as a receiver at LSU, right? We're watching Malik Neighbors across from him doing incredible things play in and play out. And then we see Brian Thomas Jr. kind of doing one thing. Is it because that's what the system asked of him? I don't know. But one thing that did concern me, probably the biggest of all, and you touched on this a little bit with Adonai Mitchell, there are plays where Brian Thomas just gives up. He just gives up and he looks frustrated. If Jaden Daniels makes a poor throw, he kind of sulks about it, kind of holds his head down. That would frustrate me as a teammate beyond all belief. It's something that if I saw and I was a draft expert and I was a GM of a team, I would probably...
You are a draft expert, Chris.
Absolutely. What am I? Yeah, thank you, man. Pat myself on the back. I would cross him off some lists. I'm going to be honest. If I needed an X receiver and that's what I saw on film, and it was deciding whether to take him in the first round or not, cross him off the list for me, it would be very concerning. But there are obviously things to like. Let's go ahead and hit play. I limited the amount of film on this guy. This is him just doing a really great job breaking down the DB, getting around him, getting really nice separation, and then just beating him to the point, to the ball. Jaden Daniels makes a really nice throw, although Thomas has to slow down a little bit for it, but he makes a really nice catch, gets a huge gain because he is this deep threat with great abilities to get downfield. He has amazing speed. We saw it at the combine. He's a 4.36 guy. He can burn you, right? And he's huge. So that is a great combo to have. And he's also 21 years old. Let's go to the next play. So this is a little bit of what concerns me to his game, right? To me, that's pretty poor effort. Jaden Daniels gives him the chance to high point the ball in the back of the end zone. He throws a pretty decent ball. It's not like you can throw it that much better than this. And Brian Thomas really does just minimal effort to go up and get this ball. He doesn't really jump. He doesn't leave his feet. He doesn't try to go over the DB. It's kind of passive in my mind. He doesn't go get it. Like if you are this X receiver, you're a big body and you're proving to me that you're more than just a deep threat. You need to do more on plays like this when I'm trying to get you the ball in the end zone. So this is part of my knack. It's just a lack of effort. It's a lack of physicality. It bothered me. And this is Florida he's playing. This isn't Alabama. This is Florida.
Yeah, not quite the same, especially last year.
Right. Okay. Let's go to the last play. It's just another deep ball. It just shows how quick this guy is, how bad he can beat you on those deep routes. He had about 6 yards of separation on this, right? That was incredible, incredible speed just to get around the DB and win to the end zone. And that's what this guy does. Um, the reason I showed these three plays, one, I wanted to show that weak play, and the other two were deep throws. That's what I saw. I tried to watch all of his Alabama film. He had 3 catches for 33 yards. I want to see guys beating top competition. I did not see that with Brian Thomas against Alabama. And then I had to come to a Florida game to see him make some big catches, and they were all go routes, right? Like, there's a concern to me on Brian Thomas that he is being overrated for his build. I think Adonai Mitchell has more creativeness, more tools to his game than a Brian Thomas does. Brian Thomas's what he wins at are really good things to win at, right? Being stronger, bigger, faster, and showing that you can win with those on tape is special. But if you're going to be a top 15 draft pick, I need a lot more than that. I didn't see it versus Alabama, especially, and I didn't even really see it against Florida. Last thing I'll say, this to me is a guy that is going to go in the first round because of how fast he is, how easily he wins deep routes. So he's going to be a first round pick. He's not somebody I would take. I would keep my hands off of him. But because of, again, the speed size combo that he offers, and again, that kind of easy movements that he has, those are special traits that are going to make him the number 5 receiver in this draft. I think that's where he ends up going. I hope Xavier Worthy goes before him, but I think that that's kind of the range. I think that's where he ends up going. But again, he's just not on my list.
He's a prototype, and that's what's propping him up, hoisting him up, whatever term you want to use. That's why he is so coveted, because you see that and you go, I can do something with this. I can make this guy into a top wide receiver in this league, because there are guys who are at the top of this league at wide receiver who are not as big and not as fast as this guy is. So I absolutely can mold this guy into a playmaker, a superstar. Some of this is innate. We use that word a lot. There's a lot to this game that is innate, regardless of how big and fast you are. I don't know if he doesn't have it, but he hasn't shown it consistently just yet. A lot of his best plays are just downfield, to where when you just take a step back, you go, okay, he's simply bigger, faster, and stronger than the guy that was lined up across from him. So that's why he won this rep. That's why he got open. That's why this was a touchdown. And that's fine if once you get to the league and you're not as much bigger, faster, and stronger than the guy across from you, you can still win because you have techniques to rely on, and you have the feel for the game to where you can counter what defenses throw at you. You can still be successful. That wasn't shown, and he just didn't have to show it too often. And you mentioned the Bama game, and at that point he did, and he didn't show it a lot in that game. And so you go back wanting more when you watch a player like this, because you want to see everything else match up to the height, weight, speed numbers, the prototype that you see just walking off the bus. And it's not quite there yet. But you look at this player and you go, I'm really going to pass on this guy. And what if, he goes elsewhere and he does put it all together? Then that's the type of stuff that you lose a job for passing a guy like this in the draft if he goes on to be successful, because all those eyes go back to you and say, what were you thinking passing up on this guy? And I mean, obviously not the same tier or realm at all. But when you draft Greg Ellis, even if the person you draft ahead of this guy turns out to be a good player, when you draft Greg Ellis instead of Randy Moss, you have questions to answer. So that's the juggling act, to where, these are all the things that are considered come draft day as to where these guys ultimately end up. Because I think this guy, I think Brian Thomas can be a top 12 receiver in this league, but I'm scared to draft him. And that's where, that's where it's really tough to where you want to slot this guy. And if you're an all-22 manager, it's actually kind of easy towards the end of your rookie draft. If you have the ability to take a luxury pick, this is the perfect luxury pick in round 5, 6, or 7 in all 22 if you want to go ahead and take it. Might even be gone before then to where it's not a luxury pick anymore. But that's what we're dealing with here with Brian Thomas. It really is boom or bust the way I see it, because I wanted to see more when the talent and the competition level matched what he brings to the table physically. It left you wanting more.
It's so hard because I think it'd be really hard for a team like Jacksonville to pass on this guy in the first round because of them losing Calvin Ridley and Brian Thomas Jr. looking like T. Higgins, right? It's like, do I want to trade for T. Higgins or do I want to try to draft the next T. Higgins and not have to pay him, right? And that's kind of, I think, the debate that some of these teams are going to have. So it's really hard for me to say that. Just let's wrap up with, I want to just hear you rank these 5 guys that we talked about today. How did they rank for you?
If I had to rank them today, it's the 2 Texas guys. It's probably Worthy, followed by Mitchell.
1 and 2, or at the end?
No, 1 and 2. I'm going 1 through 5. It's probably Worthy, Mitchell. Oh my gosh, Coleman and Thomas are right there. It depends. It depends how I feel that day. And then Franklin is 5th. Okay.
All right. So mine is Worthy, Thomas, Mitchell, Franklin, Coleman. So and Coleman is behind guys we talked about yesterday for me. So I made that pretty clear. But okay, that's it. Let's wrap up. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. If you haven't yet, please give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at all22_PFF, and give us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcast. And have a great day.